Hi, this is Daniela Wolf with Bestie Life, the podcast, and this is your community to support you through the little and not so little events that make up your day-to-day life. From the I've got this moments to the I just can't moments. We are here to empower all women to find and develop the skills they need to find peace, balance, and the bliss in their busy. Through solo episodes as well as interviews with amazing women who share their journey and their story and how it works for you. I hope you find the inspirations to make you laugh, think, as well as maybe rethink what you thought you knew, and connect as we realize that we are all living similar ups and downs and don't have to do it alone. So excited for you to hear this episode, and thanks so much for joining me today. Hi, this is Daniela with Bestie Life, the podcast, and today I am so excited for you to meet Christine Mathieu. She is a wealth coach, and if you haven't heard of a wealth coach, the approach that Christine takes is the fact that wealth has nothing to do with money. Instead, wealth is definitely like a state of mind, a state of well-being when it comes to your happiness and fulfillment. And so she sees your purpose then is to live in a way, personally and financially, that supports your well-being as well as the well-being of others. As a survivor of cancer, divorce, and bankruptcy, she knows so much about navigating major life transitions and how to maintain that feeling of wealth throughout it. So I'm so excited to dive in, Christine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
We were talking off camera before we got on because I was just at this fantastic workshop with you and another woman. And, just even learning a little bit more about your own relationship with money is so empowering. But let's back up a little bit and talk about where you started, how you got here, and all of that.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. How did I end up as a wealth coach? And what the hell is that?
Exactly.
What is that?
Because it's different than a financial planner or advisor, right?
Exactly. And I was just going to say that I actually started out, right? I started out as a financial advisor back in 1991. Oh my God, I almost hesitate to say that. That's 33 stinking years ago.
No, the 90s are coming back. It's all cool again.
Right? Thank God. But yeah, so yeah, back in 1991, I started as a financial advisor, and it was in 2008, 09, during that time frame. We know it as the Great Recession. So at the time, I was a financial consultant with one of the local banks. And oh my gosh. Okay, so let's think back to what that time period, right, was like. It was a time of massive volatility, like significant volatility across everything, right? There was political, social unrest, and certainly economic unrest, and it had an impact on the market, right? The marketplace and investment performance and so forth. But this was the first time that we felt such volatility on a global scale, right? On a global scale. So it's what I noticed in my clients back then was this fear, like intense fear, like a fear that I had not experienced up until that point. And I was a financial advisor for almost 20 years, 20 years. But it was just this time of intense fear. And with intense fear came this impaired financial decision-making. Right? So this fear led to this decision-making process that was acutely impaired. People, they were impulsive, right? With their decision-making. There was just a massive sell-off. I mean, we were talking market corrections of 40, 50, 60%. And because, the market just kept going down, 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 all that people wanted to do was to stop that bleeding, right? They just wanted to get off that downward cycle of the roller coaster because they didn't believe that it was going to go, back up. But everything is cyclical, but they couldn't ride it out. So what did they do? They acted impulsively. They gave no thought to the consequences of said action, right? Future consequences of that action. And they sold, right? They sold their positions. And it didn't matter if these were positions that were held inside of a retirement account, or if these were positions that were just non-qualified, right? Non-retirement positions, but like mutual funds or individual stocks. They just sold them. And as an advisor at the time, it did not matter what practical or logical or rational
Mm-hmm.
advice, I was giving it. I was laying out projections, right? Saying if you hold on to this and stay the course, it will come back around. You're going to be okay. Right here
Right.
it is in black and white in numbers. Nope, didn't matter what I said. I could not. As an advisor back then, I was not equipped to help people navigate their emotional reactions, right,
Yeah.
to what was going on, which meant I really could not help them in terms of their financial decision making, right, and the process, right, the process
Yeah.
that we go through, when we go about making decisions. So that's when I noticed the missing piece, right? The missing piece was that one's relationship with money,
Mm-hmm.
right? In other words, what was influencing their decision making, right? The emotions, what were the
Mm-hmm.
emotional influencers? What was influencing them at that base level or survival level, right? That instinctive, level. That's all about, the relationship that we have with money. But you know what?
Yeah.
Even though things like, oh my gosh, I think money coaching, has been around for 25 years. Certainly back then in 2008, it had already been around for better than 10 years at that point. So it wasn't anything new, but it was not mainstream. It's
Right.
still really not,
Yeah.
mainstream.
We're working on
Um,
that though.
we are working on that. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's why I
we
talk
are.
about it as part of your self-care. Even the way you think about money is so much part of your self-care because, like you said, that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So really we're talking about our inner money dynamics. We're talking about our belief and behavioral patterns around money,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how we come to make the decisions that we're making, and how that influences our overall quality of life, right? Our overall sense of well-being. So with wealth coaching, right? So wealth coaching is the process by which we work towards transforming our inner relationship with money
Mm-hmm.
through awareness building. So it's a very specific step-by-step methodology, right, where we bring to light and then we address one's subconscious, right? So these are patterns that are in operation at that subconscious or unconscious level. So we're going to dig deep, we're going to bring it to light so that we can
Mm-hmm.
look at these patterns, decide which patterns we want to hold on to, right? Decide on the patterns that are working for us, and then decide on those patterns that are not working for us, how we want to go about releasing them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
transforming them, right?
Yeah.
So that the best of our efforts and intentions are really truly supportive of everything that we want, in life.
Yeah, and especially bringing those unconscious things to the conscious level, I think is so powerful because they're controlling us either way. But when we have that
Yes.
awareness, we can be so much more intentional. Definitely learning about your money types, which I know you're going to talk about. I did your quiz, and I can't wait to share about that because it doesn't seem like when you're going through it, it's going to be as impactful as it is, but it nailed me spot on.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, as I was reading each description for the types, I was like, yup, yup.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Where do you want to talk about? I know you and I had talked briefly, about talking about boundaries because I know that's your sweet spot, right? In
Yeah.
the work that you do, right? You do a lot of work around personal boundaries, and I do a lot of work around really financial boundaries. So if
Yeah.
you
So let's
want,
talk
we can.
about boundaries and then let's talk about the different types.
Yep, and then bring in those money types because the money types are going to point to where we lack them,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's usually the starting point as because most of us when we come to this work, we find out that we don't have boundaries. So the way I have come to define boundaries, and really this applies to whether we're talking about money or something else, right? The way that I've come to define boundaries is, being very clear about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, right? Personally and
Yeah.
financially. right? And I guess another way of saying that would be what can you say yes to and what must you say no to,
Yeah.
right? In order to be in integrity, right? With yourself, in alignment with, gosh, whatever goals you may have, set up for
Yeah.
yourself.
And boundaries is definitely a balance of yes and no. I think so many times people think boundary is just an I'm not, no, negative type of thing, but it truly is what you're open to, what you're allowing in and saying yes to.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And when you're saying no, right, we want to make sure that we're saying no without guilt.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Without guilt, without remorse, right? And I know, I mean, for the most part, um, I raised my boys on my own, right? So there were a couple periods of time where I was married, but for the most part, single mom. And when you have two boys that are in soccer and they're playing at an academy level, right? I believe me, I had caught myself where I was violating, financial boundaries, right? I was going, overspending, if you will, right? So let's think of a tool, right? A financial tool that helps us stay on track and honor boundaries. Right. So one of those tools, and I know it's it's a word that we don't often like, but a budget.
Yeah, that's your B word, right?
Yeah, that's
Boundaries
my
is
B
mine.
word. Budget. Although what I prefer is conscious spending plan, right? Or CSP, for short, conscious spending plan, right? Because again, we're talking about awareness. Right. So, and when we spend money, we don't want to look at it as something that's good or bad. And we certainly don't want to perceive this conscious spending plan as something that is limited, right, in nature, because really a conscious spending plan is flexible, right? It doesn't have to feel restrictive or limited. And I think that's most people's interpretation of the word budget. Right there, when we're told, we got to, right, we
it's
need
like
to formulate.
I can't do this anymore. I can't buy that anymore.
Exactly. Right. And again, there's never a right or wrong to one's spending. There's never a right or wrong to one's saving, right? How we go about, saving money. It really is just finding the right way for you that's in alignment with what it is that you really want. Right. And honoring that. So when it comes to, the formulation of, and then the implementation of, and then the monitoring, of this conscious spending plan, this is where we find where, we may have gaps in financial boundary setting, right? Whether we've established a boundary and we're violating it, or perhaps we recognize that we don't have any boundaries, at all.
Right.
I want to give like an example. When it comes to we're talking about spending. So a boundary violation, or perhaps the lack of any boundaries, would be overspending.
Yeah. And
right?
especially, I'm sure with our kids, it's easier to do that because it's not about us. It becomes that martyr moment of I'm going to spend everything on my kids. I think there's like a meme that says, my daughter's walking around with a $80 Stanley Cup, $100 Lulus, and I'm wearing, 10-year-old leggings from Target or something.
That's exactly it. And look what you just did. You just naturally brought in one of the money types, one of the money archetypes, the martyr.
Okay.
Right? So that
good
martyr,
transition, right?
right in there. Good work there, Miss Danielle. You could tell. See, Danielle did her homework. She did her reading assignment before she attended that event. But yeah, so the martyr. Okay, so the martyr is one of the 8 money types or money archetypes. So for those that may not be familiar with what archetypes are, if you're familiar with Carl Jung or Jungian psychology, he has an expansive body of work on archetypes and archetypal language and guidance. But archetypes actually date back as far as Plato. So Carl Jung was not the founder or creator of archetypes. It goes way, way back. But he certainly presented them in a way where we could when we learn about these particular archetypes, it helps us increase our level of self-awareness so that ultimately we can slow our thinking process down, come back into the present moment, and be a better and more effective decision maker. Right. So he often talked about shadows, right? Getting to know your shadows, your shadow aspect or your shadow side. Right. So these would be all of the characteristics and tendencies, which would include emotional responses that would be deemed as negative or challenging, right? That would get in the way of whatever it is that we really want and that we're working towards. And that's what these archetypes help us to understand. They help us to understand our shadow side, or what patterns are influencing and getting in the way of truly effective decision making, right? What's taking us out of the present moment. Right. Even from a neuroscience standpoint, 95% of our thinking process occurs at that passive or fear-based level, right? It's occurring at an unconscious, subconscious level. So most of the time, our thinking and what we ultimately decide to do, the actions that we take, are more instinctive or emotional in nature. We're actually mindless, if you think about it, right? We're actually mindless. Only 5% of the time are we truly mindful, which means we are in that third brain where we are active, where we are in a state of active thinking, where we're truly conscious and aware. Right. So the work involved, and this is where the archetypes, the money types can help us, is to bring us back into that present moment so that we are fully aware of what we're choosing.
Right. Absolutely. Of what we're choosing. Yeah. Because like you said, it's so passive. And you said it's kind of that underlying, I think shadow was the word you used, like for mine, top one, it highlighted, I think it's called the innocent, and it says, kind of put your head in the sand and you avoid things. And I was like, that is unfortunately a habit that I have that I don't even realize. I think sometimes I do, but now that I'm aware of it, I am so much more intentional about changing the way I'm thinking and acting on that.
Exactly. Yeah. So even Carl Jung will say, it's not that your shadows go away. Right. It's not so much that these negative patterns and characteristics go away. It's just that you'll have a greater self-awareness about them. You're going to notice them more quickly when they show up. And then you are now better equipped to course correct. Right. It's like you said, to come back into that present moment and be more intentional. Yeah. So that innocent money type that you just, referenced, that you noticed, about yourself, taking the ostrich approach, right? The innocents just want to bury their
don't
head
tell me
in
any bad news.
Yeah, I don't want to look at it, right? They're the ones that, aside from the fool, right? So the fool is another money, archetype. The innocent and the fool, actually, they collude. They partner up a lot together. Yeah, they like to play together quite a bit. But both of them lack having a fundamental financial decision-making process, mostly because they are more passive, they are more fearful, so they'll resist things like formulating and putting a conscious spending plan into action. Right. They don't want to look at cash flow. They don't want to look at their spending patterns.
Which is then great when you're married to somebody who hands you spreadsheets with your financial spending and you're like, oh God, no. Especially when he does that before my coffee. I'm like, honey, not today.
Exactly.
But like I said, now that I'm aware of it and I know his type, because we actually ended up both doing it, again, it changes the way we think about money. It changes the way we're going to feel and talk about and act on it.
Yeah. And, when you have that awareness, now you're in a better position to establish and maintain those financial boundaries. Right. And it's not to say that we're not going to make mistakes. Right. We're not going to overstep, that we're not going to overspend. Right. But yeah, because that happens. But like I said before, whether we call it a budget or conscious spending plan, it's not. The intention behind those is not to limit or to restrict, right? It's actually to empower.
To know I'm going to spend that on this, but at least to not feel that guilt and shame around it probably is part of what you mean by that?
Yes.
I love that.
Yep, exactly. Now, if we're talking about the tyrant, now the tyrant money type has a different type of dynamic. So the tyrant money type, so tyrants can be, oftentimes they are financially successful, hands down. They are financially successful, but they also suffer from chronic not enoughness,
Mm-hmm.
They suffer from, they are actually fearful, right? Which is why that's where that chronic not enoughness comes from. They are also quick to criticize not just others but themselves. They're highly
Mm-hmm.
critical, judgmental, quick to anger,
Right.
right? Probably have a fairly sharp tongue, around money. It's kind of my way or the highway type of thing with a tyrant, as well. But now I just lost where I was going with the boundary thing. Oh, yes. So the tyrants can be very good because they'll have their warrior with them, right? The warrior is very good action taker. They're goal oriented, very decisive. So when you put the tyrant and the warrior together, it's going to have the appearance, right, that this conscious spending plan, this budget is right on track and everything is moving, right, really well, like a machine. But then the tyrant can go out and spend money and then feels that guilt and remorse. Even though it was a planned purchase, they may feel that guilt and remorse because deep down, the underlying operating pattern that's sabotaging their sense of fulfillment, like, yeah, I'm doing everything right and now I can celebrate. Nope, they can't celebrate because of that chronic not enoughness. They're actually operating from a place of lack and scarcity.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So they could have the best of intentions. They could have the plan in place and they're following through it to a T. But even those planned purchases leave them feeling guilty or with buyer's remorse.
Right.
Right.
So we've talked about, of the 8 type, we've talked about 5 so far. I think the innocent, the fool, the tyrant, the warrior.
Well, we touched a little bit on the martyr, but I didn't get too much into the martyr, right? So the martyr. Oh my gosh. So as parents, as those of us that are in business or perhaps are in a position where we are of service, right? We have difficulty in setting a fee schedule that is truly representative of the value that we deliver, right? It's like,
so for my entrepreneurs listening,
yes,
keep this one in mind.
Yeah, the word I want to use, I think, is altruism. Right? Where we feel as though we're doing something wrong, right? We just want to help people. We just want to be of service, right? Why do I have to charge money? Well, if you want to live and be able to pay your bills and then save, for the future, right? And there's nothing wrong. See, that's the other thing. So if there's something, if the perception is that there's something inherently wrong with charging a fee for the work that you do, there's an underlying pattern that needs to be examined. Now that could be creator artist. Okay,
which is another one. Type. So we're on
that's another one. So that could be creator artist because the creator artist struggles with finding balance, right? Finding balance between their authenticity and finding balance with the physical or financial world, right? So how do we bring money and what is intrinsically important to me? How do I bring those two together? So that may be playing itself out with the entrepreneur, that might, struggle with setting fees.
So we have 2 more, 7 and 8.
Murder. I keep coming back to the murder. So the martyr, parents. Hello, parents. I'm going to use myself as an example. I was a soccer mom for a really long time. Tuition, not cheap. And there was one season in particular that I lost complete sense. I lost control. Oh my God. It was like out of sight, out of mind. Forget my conscious spending plan. FOMO, fear of missing out, the fear of my kid missing out. Right, because they kept winning, and then they won State Cup, which meant then we had to travel to Chicago. Well, we had already been to Florida. Now we have to go to Chicago, and I'm like, oh my God, right? The cost involved. So massive financial boundary violation, right, on my part. But so easy to do because how do you tell your kid no?
Right, because they didn't do anything wrong. It's not because of them.
Your kid didn't. Exactly. So, but a lot of times it's not even about the kid. Really, it was about me. And this is where the martyr comes in, because the martyr is afraid to say no because they're afraid of being judged by someone else. So my fear was, oh my gosh, if I take my kid out, what are these other parents going to say about me as a parent? Right. So big lesson there in terms of the martyrs, because martyrs have a tendency to self-sacrifice, even around money.
Yeah.
right? It's self-sacrifice. I'm going to put everybody else first. But really, what's underlying all of that is being
Mhm.
seen as imperfect,
Right.
right? And being afraid of being judged, being seen as
Yep.
having done something wrong,
Okay. Now we've got the
right?
magician is another one, right?
Yes. So the magician is the ideal
Mm-hmm.
money type. We want the magician in charge of all of our financial decision making, right? And we want that, and so we want the magician to be of primary influence, and we want the warrior to be of secondary influence. Right. Because the thing to remember about the warrior has financial boundary issues too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's say, for example, if when someone takes that money types quiz, and let's say, for instance, their warrior is super active, right? So they're way beyond that 50 percentile. Let's say they're well into 70%, maybe even 80%. And then let's say their magician might be at 50%, but then you've got a super active tyrant and an active victim. Oh, that was young. We didn't even talk about
I was
victim
going to say
and
that we
victim.
have one more left. And I know a lot of this too, it might not make sense until you actually take this quiz, which I know
Yep.
we're going to give you access to so that you can find out so much more about you. So yeah, let's catch up on those too.
Yes. Yeah. So what may happen there is when I see a score like that, I see a super high, warrior, but then I see, other money types that are of active influence getting in the way of such good effort. And I'll just say to the person, you've got to be tired. You're efforting, right? You're working so stinking hard. You're mentally tired. You're probably physically tired as well. And they're like, oh my God, yes, I am so freaking tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
Right.
it's not just
Um,
about money at that point.
no, it is not just about money, but look how much we can learn, right,
Mm-hmm.
through our money dynamics. It's literally the subconscious and conscious at war with one another. So I always say the warrior is only as good as the information, or it's only as good as who's leading it, right?
Right.
Who is giving it its set of instructions? Are the instructions coming from the magician, or are they coming from one of the other
Money.
archetypes, money
Yep.
types?
So
Okay.
then the
So the
last one.
magician,
Let's
yeah.
go ahead. Yep. So the
I was
magician.
just going to say quickly, because the magician, the reason why it's the ideal one is because the magician is in total alignment with what matters most. The magician is absolutely clear on what their core values are. The magician brings into the present moment all of the lessons that have been learned in the past. The magician comes to the present moment and comes to every financial decision without judgment and without attachment either.
Right. No, and that's
Right.
definitely an ideal to work towards because these money types, they're not
Mhm.
set in stone. It's not like,
Nope.
oh, this is your archetype and you can't change it. When you have that
Exactly.
awareness, you can absolutely make different decisions, do differently, and transition between different types.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not a personality test, right? When you take this
Mm-hmm.
quiz, it just simply shows you where you're at in terms of your financial decision making, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like life, your relationship with money is dynamic. It is not static. So you are absolutely correct. You have you have the capability of shifting what is of passive versus active influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, hey, life happens, change happens. We get the, rug pulled out from underneath us quite often in our lifetime. You and I can both speak to that quite well,
Exactly.
right? That's the other attribute that the magician brings to the forefront. One of the magician's strengths is resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The magician, in the face of great change, like a major life transition, whether it's divorce, the loss of a loved one, right? Widowhood, retirement, a job loss, right? You name it.
Yep.
In the face of a major life transition, the magician knows how to maintain a calm and centered mind,
Right.
right? Because the magician knows that a peaceful mind is our greatest resource for truly empowered, decision making.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
Yep.
why too, I love too that like even with your practice as a coach, you're still in a financial planning office. Like you're not
Yes.
separate from that world. You are part of it and you enhance working with an advisor and a planner as far as people making decisions from a more aware and enlightened place than
Yep.
just from those subconscious fear-based statuses.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even with my colleagues, I'm able to give them insight, into what's going on, in the minds of their clients. So then in turn, they become, better advisors, right? More compassionate, more empathetic. Yeah. So it's even helpful, for the advisors. But even though I'm situated inside of a financial firm, it doesn't mean you have to
Yep.
be a financial
Right.
planning or
No.
investment client of note, right? We can engage and you can have an outside, advisor. That's perfectly fine too.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so that the link for the quiz is going to be live in the show notes
Yep.
below because absolutely, I think just even getting that awareness, that baseline, finding out a little bit more, you're going to want to re-listen to this episode to find out about those different types. I think victim was the only one we want to maybe just touch on with that we didn't talk about.
Yeah. So victim, okay. And this, you might see the victim show up even in couples. Right. So if you're, so back to that conscious spending plan, right? So you have two people, assuming both are wage earners, but even if one is and the other isn't, right? So that's a whole nother dynamic. Making sure that you come to the table and you're having a healthy conversation around, money. Where the victim may come in is, let's say the innocent leads the charge and says, no, I'm going to defer all the decision making to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because then enter victim, because if anything goes wrong, I'm not accountable. I can blame you.
Ah, that's big.
Okay. Yeah. So the victim is oftentimes the blamer,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're going to blame others for the state of their financial circumstances and their overall state of well being, right? So they're going to blame others. They are often unforgiving. They can be resentful, right? So this is where, so resentment, martyr,
Mm-hmm.
partners up with victim, right? So you have martyrs that give, right? I keep giving, I have an adult, child. Here I am still
Mm-hmm.
trying to save
Yeah.
towards retirement and I'm still supporting my adult child. So then there's the resentment. So we have martyr that can't seem to give enough because they don't want to get to the heart of why they can't stop, why they can't say no.
Mm-hmm.
And then the victim steps in with the resentment piece.
Yeah, no, this is just such an amazing science. So, like I said, I can't stress enough,
Yeah.
take that free quiz, find out your archetypes, connect with Christine. Before we go, one thing I always, you talked about giving back, and I always love to talk about gratitude with my guests because I always think, in
Mm,
addition to money being a form of self care, is how we think about it. I think gratitude is always an underutilized form of
yeah.
self care. And definitely, when it comes to money, I think everyone's always looking for more as opposed to being
Yes.
thankful for what they have. But in general,
Yes.
as a person, what would you say are your top 2 to 3 things you're the most grateful for?
Okay, so you know what? The first word that just popped into my head was for my kids, namely my oldest, teaching me about resiliency, how
Yeah.
to be, what it looks like. We
Mhm.
don't have time to go into that story, but resiliency because I was able to learn that from him when he was like 4 years old, that has carried through all of my major life transitions,
Right.
right?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so
great.
I would say, resiliency, and and the other thing that I would say is honestly being able to do the work that I do, helping people to be less afraid of money and
Mhm.
to embrace it as a classroom,
Right.
right? Honestly, it's a classroom for self-discovery. And when you're able to look at money in that way, you're allowing yourself, well, not only are you allowing yourself to see money in different ways, but you're allowing to see yourself in different
Yeah.
ways, right?
Yeah, that lack of judgment and more objectivity
has got to be
Yes.
just huge.
Yeah, exactly.
So no, I mean, this went way too fast, Christine. I could almost
I
do like a
know.
part 2 and 3, and maybe we're going to have to, because I think, like I said, money, it affects so many different aspects of our personality, our lives, our day-to-day, but also we give it so much more power than I think it needs to have, in so many ways.
Absolutely.
Part of what you had us read, being able to give less power to money and more to yourself when it comes to those decisions is so impactful.
Oh yeah. Cause do you remember that at the brunch event, and I said, if there's 2 things that you walk away with, the first key lesson, do you remember what the first key lesson was?
Oh gosh, can I cheat
You
and look at my notes?
you just started to touch upon it. So I'll say it super quick, right? That key lesson, if you remember anything today,
Time.
folks out there, right?
Oh, no, that's
is
what it means
that
to me.
money is nothing.
There we go.
Money is neutral. It's neutral. It actually has no value whatsoever. We assign it its value. We assign it, me, Christine, as an individual, I assign money its value, its power. And that value, that power is determined by what I believe about myself and what I choose to believe is possible.
Boom. Like mic drop. Like if you're going to walk away with those 2 things as well, in addition to all the archetypes, I mean, this was like a little money mastermind masterclass. Amazing, Christine. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know any questions or comments that you have. Also, if you can please leave an Apple 5-star review so that this episode can be shared with more women. There's 2 quotes that I love. Alone we may be strong, but together we are stronger, as well as when women support each other, incredible things happen. So let's be stronger and incredible together, as well as maybe just have some fun along the way. Thanks so much and talk to you soon. Bye.